It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.
Good evening, everybody. You're watching America First. My name is Nicholas J. Fuentes. We have a great show for you tonight. Very excited to be back here with you tonight on Thursday. We have a lot to talk about tonight, lots to get into. Big show. Our featured story, we're going to be talking all about the peace in Gaza. We were supposed to get to it last night, but we ran out of time. And tonight we'll be talking all about the deal, and there's a lot to say about it. We covered the deal all throughout last week. This is the deal that was presented at the press conference last Monday by Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. It is the 20-point plan, which was endorsed by all of the Arab Muslim countries shortly afterward. Trump said that we're going to have a breakthrough within 2 weeks. This was about 2 weeks ago. As of today in America on Thursday, I think it's midnight Israel time though, the Israeli cabinet approved the first phase of that 20-point plan. And that phase, this is a word that they are using. The 20-point plan contains no phases. It's just points. It's just bullet points. They are using the language, and by they, I mean the White House, the Israeli government, Hamas. They're saying that the first phase, which means several of the points, have been approved. And those provisions are that Israel will release hundreds of Palestinian hostages, and Hamas will release the remaining living and dead Israeli hostages. That will take place by Monday or Tuesday. In the meantime, humanitarian aid is going to flood in from Egypt. And when Hamas returns the hostages, Israel will withdraw from the Strip, but they will maintain control of roughly 50% of it, just over 50% of the Strip, leaving most of the major population centers in Gaza. And these are the points, these are the provisions of the deal that everybody has agreed upon. Here's the problem. This does not resolve really any of the actual root causes of the conflict. And what remains to be negotiated in a second or third phase, if we can even call it this, is whether Hamas will be disarmed, whether they will remain in power, whether Israel will completely or mostly withdraw from the Gaza Strip and under what conditions, and then who will administer Gaza afterward. Maybe the biggest question, will there ever be a Palestinian state that comprises the West Bank and Gaza? None of that has been resolved. There is no agreement in principle. There is no agreement in writing. And as a matter of fact, there are not even any security guarantees for Gaza. The Trump administration refused to give a written commitment that they would uphold the Israeli withdrawal. They gave a verbal commitment. So what are they really saying? They're saying the war is over for now, which is an important caveat. Everyone is saying, and by everyone, I mean the leader of Hamas and the Trump administration are saying the war is over, but the giant asterisk is for now. And for the war to truly be over, for there to be an enduring peace, they're going to need to resolve these other questions. There will need to be additional phases. And of course, that has always been the problem. There have been ceasefires. There have been two major ceasefires in the last 2 years. One in November 2023 and another in January 2025. Both of those ceasefires were broken by Israel. Both of those were temporary ceasefires that gave a reprieve to both sides that the Israelis never intended to keep. And to the extent that there was an agreement in principle on additional phases, or a comprehensive peace or a permanent ceasefire, that never got resolved. And it always meant that conflict would inevitably resume on a long enough timeline. And so that is the major question mark here. How is this really going to endure? And I don't think anyone actually has an answer for that, because I don't think the Israelis intend on having an enduring peace. But we'll talk about it. We'll analyze why this is happening now. And we'll talk about the prospect that this will be resolved at any point in the future. We're also going to talk tonight about the deployment of the National Guard to Chicago and Portland. Both have been stopped by federal judges. I'm going to be honest, I don't like it. And not for the reason that you think. You have these ICE detention centers set up in Portland and Chicago. They are doing these belligerent ICE raids. Me, I like it. Personally, I like them. I like seeing the helicopters. I like seeing 200 ICE agents storm a residential building. That's cool. I like seeing them march around the city. It makes me feel safe. Here's the problem. Their belligerence is basically daring the left to lash out, and they're getting what they asked for. The left is mobilizing in Portland and in Broadview, Illinois, right here in the west suburbs of Chicago, and they're protesting every week. There's a rhythm now. Every Friday, every Saturday, these left-wing dirtbags are showing up at the detention centers, and they're getting bigger and louder and angrier and more aggressive. And in Chicago, they're ramming into ICE vehicles, trailing ICE vehicles. The tension is increasing. And the Trump administration is spitting in their face. The Trump administration is beating them up and taunting them. And the question is the Trump administration going to follow through? They're in a brawl with the left. And the question is, are they going to finish the job? Can they put the left, lay them out on the mat and finish the job? Do they have the political will to do that? Do they have the follow through? If the answer is no, then we're barking up the wrong tree, because then all we're doing is pissing them off. And I hope they surprise me, but I don't think they will. And I don't like that we're going into this brawl with the left half-cocked. It doesn't seem like a great idea, and I'll elaborate on why that is. So that'll be our other story. It's going to be a good show. Before we get into it, I am going to change the title of the video. I actually forgot to do that. So let me just take care of that really quickly. Okay, let me do that, and that. All right, now, the other thing before we get into the show, I want to remind you to smash the follow button on Rumble, smash the like button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the show. Check out our store. We have our hats back in stock. They're shipping now. Fuentes.store, we have camo, blue, black, made in America, high quality. Subscribe to the website, americafirst.plus. You got to become an America First Plus subscriber. People say, how can I get involved? How can I support the cause? Give me money. Give me more money. $15 a month. That's not a lot of money. That's like Disney Plus. AmericaFirst.plus, you get access to the entire archive. For $30 a month, you get AI search. For $100 a month, you gain access to the $100 a month club. You get to join a group chat with me. Hit me up. I'm in there all the time. But if you're going to tag me, I get notified, okay? You're in a group chat with me. You can tag me. I get a notification. Don't abuse it. I'm in this group chat and people are just tagging me all day. And I'm like, dude, I'm trying to watch TikTok. Stop. I'm just getting all these notifications. Now, if it's good, I go in there and I reply. And I say, well, here's what I think about that. But sometimes people are just tagging me and I'm like, hey, shut the fuck up. I'm watching TikTok. You ever have to put your phone on Do Not Disturb? You're like on TikTok, you're watching a YouTube video, and like people are blowing up your phone. You get like 100 texts and emails at the same time and you just want to blow your head off. So sometimes I go in there and I'm like, hey, stop tagging me. This isn't important. Stop tagging me. So you can, you jump on in, enjoy it. Enjoy it. It's $100 a month. Get your money's worth. But check it out. That's America First Plus. What else? Hey, so get a load of this. Before we get into the news, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but I do want to do a little bit of a victory lap. The low IQ conspiracy theorists are being blitzkrieged. They're being ground under the treads of the tanks. Their heads are exploding like grapes. They're being rounded up by Mossad and executed in CIA black sites. Thank God. They are airplanes full of them are being discreetly landed at CIA black sites. They're being escorted out of the plane and summarily executed. And other remote-controlled planes are taking over on the radar, so no one even knows a thing. No one even knows they're going off the radar. Have you heard the latest on the Charlie Kirk conspiracy? Because I have. Because I've been following it very closely. And here's the latest. I saw some of the clips from Candace Owens' show. And the latest, because I'm following the Charlie Kirk investigation. True to my word. I am very interested in who killed Charlie Kirk, and so I'm really staying on top of it. And I'm looking at what's being reported by both sides, by the state and by the conspiracy side, and I'm really attuned to it. And here are the latest developments in the Charlie Kirk conspiracy. Are you ready? We find out that number one, Charlie Kirk was talking to Josh Hammer the day before he was killed. Josh Hammer is the most disgusting pro-Israel filth in America. And he's ugly. The physiognomy doesn't lie. Ugly dirtbag. Hates whites, hates Americans, loyal only to Israel. And Josh Hammer put out the receipts. Yes, after Charlie Kirk's rant about Israel, he gets on a Zoom with Josh Hammer and allays all of his concerns about the pro-Israel cause the day after. Now, that's not the worst, okay? But it goes to show, what does that tell us before anybody gets pissed? What does that tell us? It shows that Charlie was not fundamentally against Israel, as Andrew Colvett and Blake Neff and others have said. He had his concerns, but he still supported Israel. The pro-Israel crowd was turning on him. They were turning on him because they could not tolerate his accommodation for Tucker Carlson and others. It's sort of like I said last night. He was playing both sides. He wanted to keep Josh Hammer happy. He wanted to keep Tucker Carlson happy. That was his job. He was a coalition builder. He was trying to keep everybody happy. That's literally his job description. So that, I think, dilutes the text that we saw on Monday. That's the first part. Second part, we find out that his security company was not Israeli. No. Contrary to what the conspiracy theorists manipulated from a Bill Maher clip taken out of context, Charlie Kirk owned his own security company. They weren't Israeli. They weren't Jewish. They were an American company that Charlie bought. And whatever you think of them, they failed that day. They failed to protect him. And what I've heard from my own sources is that they are devastated. What I heard, and I hope someone comes out and verifies this, is that they wanted to set him up in a different part of the campus where it would be safer. But Charlie insisted on doing it in the pit because it was like a coliseum. He wanted to be in the middle of the action. And they're torn up about it. They feel terrible. They're devastated because they said he would have been safer over here. And I'm sure they're all asking themselves, what if we should have been more forceful? So no, the Israeli security team did not set him up. Seems like a lapse. Utah police was put in charge of clearing the roofs. His American security company tried to do right by him. He insisted, this is what I've heard. Either way, he owned the company. So no, the fix was not in on that front. Last but not least, and this is the best of all. As of today, Candace Owens confirms 100% that Charlie was shot from the front. That was an entry wound, and his neck did in fact stop the bullet. She says 100%. She has talked to sources firsthand, and who would know? She's been leading the charge on the conspiracy. She says 100%, take it to the bank. He got shot in the front. That's an entry wound. There was no exit wound. It was lodged in his neck. Okay, so there goes all those theories about a palm pistol, shot from underground, hit with an energy weapon, microphone exploded. Yeah, that was all bullshit. That was all fake, never happened. People talking about muzzle flashes, and yeah, that's all nonsense. People saying where he was bleeding was an exit wound, fake, false, never happened. That's right. Now, what Candace adds to this, she says, well, the death certificate does not list the caliber of bullet. She says the death certificate ordinarily will say, if they know, what type of bullet they extracted, and it doesn't say a .30-06 bullet. She says, therefore, we can extrapolate. This is speculation. She says we can assume that if the caliber of bullet is not listed, then it wasn't a .30-06. Therefore, it didn't come from Tyler Robinson's rifle. Therefore, there was another shooter. My question to that is, have you seen the death certificate? Because if not, then you're just full of shit. If you have, show us. And what's in it? Because if no bullet caliber is listed, then how do you know what type of projectile it is at all? How do you know it is a .30-06 or that it isn't something else? If it was a different caliber of bullet, would that not be listed in there? She says it doesn't say it's a .30-06. Did it say it's something else? Because if it doesn't, then how do you know what the projectile is? Or do you not know? And I don't like that it seems that every fact that comes out is pointing towards the official narrative. Entry wound from the front, that points to the official narrative. And it seems like all the speculation is wrong. Israeli security team, wrong. The bullet wound was an exit wound, wrong. False. Trap door, false, had nothing to do with it. The private jet, false. The Dairy Queen that closed, wrong location, idiot. Different Dairy Queen. It's like all of these just asking questions, speculation. Don't get me wrong. I invite people to ask the questions, and who am I? But I mean, you're allowed to ask questions. But all the speculation with each passing day gets proven wrong. How about Tyler Robinson's text messages? They took issue with the fact that he used the term vehicle. They said that sounded stilted. In Tyler Robinson's text messages with the boyfriend, he said, I can't return to my vehicle. And people grasping at straws said, who says vehicle? I've never said vehicle. Except that we find body cam footage from an earlier traffic incident, and he says vehicle. And people say that all the time. It's like, so the just asking questions, it's just constantly getting destroyed by the facts, constantly getting blown up by the facts. And rather than people stopping and saying, you know what? Maybe the official narrative is true. Instead, they're always just throwing out more baseless questions and moving on to the next. Like the letter. We were led to believe for a month that the letter contained like a fuck you to Israel. And then they published it, and the letter was the opposite of that. And what did the conspiracy theorists say? They say, well, was it emailed or mailed as a letter? Okay, what difference does it make? It's real. It's a real letter. And it didn't contain what you thought it said. But that doesn't stop them. On to the next. To the point now where it's like we're talking about Charlie Kirk told me in a dream. Go where the facts lead. So I just wanted to remind everybody, it's going to be a beautiful day in Vindication City. It's going to be a beautiful day in Right About Everything City because everybody knows me there. Everybody knows me there. I just got back from my trip to Right About Everything Always City. And yeah, they all know me there. And this is no different than any. Please get the forms ready. Get the ink. Log into your HP Smart account and prepare the printer. Get the ink, get the letter paper, because we're going to need a lot of apology forms. All these suckers that said, he got the call. He got the call. Ryan Mata, I'm looking at you, Mystery Meat. Get the forms ready. Get the pencils. Sharpen the damn pencils, because we're going to be signing a lot of forms, assholes. Oh, I can't wait. Refill, please. Thanks. Just a refill in the fucking form. Thanks a lot. So we've been watching. Not that it's a competition. It's a grave matter. But hey, but it's not a competition. It's a very serious matter, obviously. But I just, look, everybody question my credibility. I'm right. Okay, isn't my first rodeo, not my first Jew conspiracy. Thank you very much. I know you were red-pilled yesterday. But try to lurk a little bit. Try to keep up. Okay? I'm asking you to trust me a little bit on this one. Anyway, but that's that. We're going to move on, though. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but so delicious. Every day, getting nervous? Getting nervous? What's the evidence now? Because the official narrative has the murder weapon, 4 written confessions, videos and photographs, DNA on the gun. And what's in the conspiracy column? Like a dream. Candace Owens had a dream. Martin had a dream. Candace had a dream. Candace had a dream that Charlie told her I was betrayed. Well, Your Honor, I rest my case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I rest my case. Candace had a dream. It just gets more ridiculous every day. Anyway, that's that. But I do want to move on. I want to get into the news. I want to get into the news after the vindication session. Our first story, I want to talk about the ICE deportations, the DHS deployments. And I have a little bit of a hot take on this one, okay? I'm sure you've seen the news. And I talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago. I like it. I'm out here in Chicago in the streets. And every day we're seeing footage of Border Patrol and ICE agents marching through downtown Chicago. It's awesome. I love it. And they set up their detention center outside the city. And they're rounding up illegals. I don't know if you saw the latest video, but they sent in Black Hawk helicopters rappelling down from ropes, storming the building like Rainbow Six. Marching them out, it's awesome. And my question is, why can't we do this to the entire country all the time? Like, why can't we do this to the South Side? I love it. But here's the problem. Trump is becoming extremely belligerent. ICE is becoming extremely belligerent. They're not even deporting a lot of people. They're doing these very big, sophisticated, complex raids, and they get like 30 people. That's not a lot. Understand, in order to do anything meaningful with deportations, we need like 10,000 people to leave every day for 4 years, okay? To even roll back the clock to 2020, before Joe Biden got into office with the illegal immigrant population, we need roughly 10,000 people to leave every day for the next 4 years. And we're not even close. We're talking like 800 per day. And so they'll raid an apartment complex with 200 guys and they make 30 arrests. That's nothing. But I like the visuals. I like the energy. I like that on some level, they might be triggering some self-deportations. Certainly many illegal immigrants are in hiding right now. And they're having a problem with plumbers, carpenters. They're having a problem with truck drivers because illegal immigrants, they worry about being deported. And at a certain point, there's going to be an economic incentive for them just to leave. If they can't go out and work, then they're going to go home. And honestly, that's how it should be. Why should you be able to get a driver's license and a job and drive to work every day? You have no legal standing in the country, and we just tolerate that. The incentives need to be turned around, because that's really what it is. If you're poor in any country, there is just a giant green flag. Come on in, get a job, get Section 8, get food stamps, get the finest healthcare in the world, and you really have nothing to worry about, because it's like no one's going to arrest you, no one's going to remove you. You're one of those hardworking ones that's making America great. So the incentives need to be flipped, where people say, yikes, I don't want to be in America with no legal standing because I could be removed at any time. Good. Here's the problem. So they set up these detention centers in Portland and in Chicago, two very liberal cities. And they're doing these very belligerent actions, marching Border Patrol in full uniform through the city, doing these highly publicized raids with fixed-wing drones, helicopters. They're terrorizing the population. It's deliberate. And by that, all I mean is they're being visible. They want the illegal population to know that they're looking for them. That's part of creating the disincentive. But of course, what is happening in these very liberal cities? The left is responding. They're reacting. So the left is mobilizing at these detention centers with protests. And the protests are getting very rowdy and unruly and bigger. And the activists are also sounding the alarm about ICE. When they see an ICE vehicle drive through the streets, they're following the ICE vehicle, honking their horns, hanging out of the window to alert the illegals, hey, get out of Dodge, ICE is in town. ICE and law enforcement is responding to that. How? They're getting really aggressive with the protesters. And I don't know if you saw, but in Portland, they're like taunting the protesters, spraying them in the face with bear mace. They're like laughing. I think one reporter said that they're gloating as they arrest them. Now, look, I'm not complaining about that from the point of view of a liberal. I think it's kind of funny. There's a part of me that likes to see that, because these protesters are out of control. They're emboldened. Trump won the election. We have federal law enforcement. They're enforcing the damn laws. They're taking people that have no legal standing and they're removing them from the country. That's the law. And these protesters think that because they don't like it, they get to interfere and impede law enforcement, and that's not right. And so they should be arrested for obstructing. They should be subjected to less than lethal or non-lethal means of crowd control. Like, I don't have a problem with that by itself. But when the left-wing agitators see ICE being belligerent, and then they see law enforcement taunting them, there's a reaction. Whatever you think about it, like it, love it, gotta have it, whatever, there's gonna be a reaction. And so the left they're getting really militant in Chicago. So far, there's been at least 2 or 3 instances of left-wing protesters now ramming and boxing in ICE vehicles. This is not getting a ton of news coverage, but about a week ago, I think it was the end of last week, there was an ICE truck moving through the street, and 10 vehicles surrounded the ICE car, boxed it in, and one of the protesters that boxed in the ICE car had a semi-automatic rifle. ICE jumps out of the car, they shoot her. She goes to the hospital. Chicago PD is told to stand down. ICE calls for support. They say, we need law enforcement. We're boxed in by 10 vehicles. Chicago PD says, don't respond. Don't help them. Okay? There was another instance where an SUV rammed into an ICE vehicle going fast from behind. Not hard to see where this is going. How long before the ICE detention facility is bombed? How long before ICE agents are shot, like BLM style? like in 2015, where some left-wing nut job just lights into them. God forbid. You don't want that to happen, but you know some psycho is thinking that. Now, what is law enforcement's response? This is where we get to today. In response to the tension between ICE and the local police, the tension between ICE and the left-wing agitators, now the Department of War is activating the National Guard. And Trump is sending in hundreds of National Guardsmen to protect ICE and DHS operatives as they carry out their law enforcement duties. So now there's more federal law enforcement from Texas going against not only the left-wing agitators, but also the city police. Federal judge struck that down today. Says there's no insurrection in Chicago, there's no emergency, there's no reason for law enforcement, federal law enforcement to deploy, no reason for the National Guard to be federalized and activated and sent in. And what I see happening is a deliberate strategy of tension. I think that someone in the White House knows what they're doing. I think that person might be Stephen Miller. I'm not sure. I don't think it's Kristi Noem. I don't think she's that smart. I think there's a deliberate strategy of tension. They're being visible. They're being belligerent. They're antagonizing the left. The left is out of control. That gives them a pretext to bring in more feds to carry out their duties. Age-old, very, very obvious principle at work here. Now, if you had somebody serious in charge of the country, I would be all over this. I might like it. Because it's about time that order is restored here. There is no order. Think about how outrageous this situation is for a second. We have millions of people in America within our borders that we don't even know who they are. They have no legal standing to be here, and yet they act like they're at home. They're receiving government benefits. Like, we work. This is our birthright to be here. We're being taxed on our labor, and that money is paying for foreign nationals that have no legal standing. And they're here, and they're taking advantage of all the public services, healthcare, education, housing, law enforcement, all of it, emergency services. It isn't right. And you have mayors and governors that are protecting these people. They're standing in the way of the federal government enforcing their constitutional powers, which is to defend the borders and the homeland against foreign invaders. So what we really do have is sort of like a soft insurrection. You've got criminals are out of control, whether they're illegal immigrants, whether it's gangbangers that they turn them loose after they catch them. There was a big story about a black criminal that murdered a baby, and he got out after, 10 years? And they're protected by liberal state and local officials. It has to stop. And the reason that it goes on is that every time a Republican administration tries to break up the sanctuary cities or tries to go in and do something, you get the shitbag leftists that come out and protest. And these are the scum of the earth. These are anarchists. These are people with no jobs. These are straight up communists. They want the chaos. They want America to be a disgusting shithole. They want America to be a gross commune filled with disgusting, smelly people, trash, graffiti, the smell of weed, the stench of weed. They want that. And always, the Republicans they're afraid of all of it. They don't want to step on the toes of the local and state governments. They don't want to arouse the anger of the left-wing agitators. They don't want to be perceived as racist for deporting illegals or arresting blacks. So we live in this hostage situation. Our country is being held hostage by a metric shit ton of the lowest common denominator of people that really belong in prison. So we do need a tyrant by definition. And by tyrant, I don't mean someone abusing their power. I don't mean a demagogue. I don't mean somebody that is a totalitarian dictator. I mean, we need someone that is going to sort of suspend the normal operating procedure to remedy this crisis. Because we need law enforcement. That's what the president is. The executive executes the laws, okay? The legislature writes the laws. The judicial interprets the laws. The executive executes the laws. That's where that comes from. He's the chief executive because he executes the laws on the books. Law enforcement is the president's job. So the president needs to intervene and temporarily bypass what is considered conventional or normal, maybe not necessarily illegally, but we are in a crisis. One president needs to get in the middle of it and say, look, we just can't tolerate 40 million people with no legal standing living in our country anymore and leeching off the public dole and taking advantage. We can't have left-wing agitators that hide their faces and use violence and intimidation and terror tactics to prevent law enforcement from doing its job. Like, we need to get in, really crack down on this stuff so that we can live in our cities. We need to take back control of the cities. It cannot be forfeited to lawlessness anymore. Here is the problem. Here's the rub. Is Trump the guy to do it? Is his administration competent? Are they able? And I think the answer is no. My fear, my concern is that they are agitating the left. They are provoking the left. They're inciting the left. And the left is emboldened. They're emboldened by the media, by the governors, by the mayors. You see it. Like, they think the rules don't apply, and they're not afraid. And they're out there in the streets. They don't play by the rules like we do. And the Trump administration daring them, it pissing them off. He's getting into a direct confrontation with them. And if he is not willing to take it all the way and overwhelm them and decisively defeat them such that they are scattered, that the problematic ones are identified and arrested, if they're planning attacks on ICE, that's terrorism. If you've got left-wing agitators that are planning to shoot ICE, yeah, that's a problem. That's terrorism. If you're not willing to identify and arrest the leaders, scatter the sheep, mass arrests of protesters obstructing law enforcement, putting them away for 4 years so that we can finish the job, then what actually are you doing? You're creating a powder keg. You're pissing off the other side, and you're just making things worse. That's my biggest concern. Because what politics really is on some level, it's this formula. How do you activate your side without activating the other side? How do you get your people energized? And how do you get your people engaged and willing to do activism? Carry out your agenda with popular support without getting the other side so pissed off that they rally in the streets and then they come back in the next election and they send you home. And I fear that what Trump is doing, all it's doing is activating the other side, while his own side may not even fully support what he's doing, while his own administration may not be organized and competent enough to see it through. And the question is, what happens in 2028 when the left is reorganized and they have fortified themselves and they found their messaging, and the right has J.D. Vance, who is a dork and who sucks, and the Democrats win in 28? They're going to come back with a vengeance. And the way that Trump has been operating, going after James Comey, going after Letitia Jackson, going after the illegals, like, in principle, I support it. Spiritually, I support it. But if you're not willing to actually deconstruct the left and make it so that they can't come back, like really disassemble their base of power and salt the earth so that it will take a generation for them to come back, then what really are you doing other than breathing oxygen into the fire? What are you doing other than pissing them off, militating, making them militarized and energizing them so that they can come back and say, you went after Comey and Letitia Jackson, now we are really coming after you. Your ICE thugs were punching and beating up left-wing agitators. Well, now we are going to arrest all the ICE agents. We're going to arrest all the right-wing podcasters, people like me. I really question if there's a plan here. Because historically, this is what Trump does. It's like in his first term. Trump ran in 2016, pissed everybody off, and then everything just got worse. BLM raged and just terrorized everybody, and Trump didn't stop it. The media, the Silicon Valley, they ratcheted up the censorship, and Trump did nothing to stop it. Like, things actually got worse in his first term because of his lack of follow-through. And I wonder, with the strategy of tension, one way this can go is it creates a pretext for that kind of convention-breaking governance that can really restore order. People will have this wake-up moment when they say, wow, we really do have a problem here. Like in the LA riots, when the illegal immigrants were rioting in LA and they were burning cop cars and terrorizing the city, a lot of people were saying, gee whiz, you know, this is not a good look. Like, this is proving Trump's point. And if you take that crisis and say, in response to the riots, we're coming in heavy and we're coming in hard and we're going to isolate the leadership of the opposition and disassemble them in the way that Biden did to the J6ers and make them neutralized, you know, then it could be a very good thing. But if Trump is not willing to do that, if he doesn't understand the enemy, if he's not willing to go all the way against the enemy, if he's going to chicken out, in other words, against Brandon Johnson and Pritzker and the federal judges, then all we're doing is pissing off the enemy and guaranteeing they're going to punch us back 1,000 times as hard, because that's what the left does. And Curtis Yarvin said something similar. He's been saying that, and I'm not his biggest fan. I don't really like him. But Yarvin sees the writing on the wall too, which is he's not coming in heavy or hard or fast enough, even just in these first 9 months, that would demonstrate a level of seriousness to show that he's really going to be this Caesar-like figure, a transformative figure that we're going to need to guarantee the right wing's ascendancy. A new right-wing realignment, new right-wing political order. It seems like he is just accelerating the swing of the pendulum, and that it's going to swing back to the left and punch us all in the face. That's the concern. Because I see it. It's in my backyard. It's out here in Broadview, and it's chaos. Like, there's hundreds of protesters. They're ramming ICE cars. They're not afraid. And they have the backing of the governor, of the mayor, of the media. And if Trump is going to do this, hey, do it. You're right. The mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois, they're inciting terrorism. You've got actual dirtbag terrorists armed with semi-automatic rifles ramming their cars into ICE. That is attempted murder. And the governor and the mayor are doing a press conference supporting this kind of stuff. Like, you got to go all the way, Don. You got to go all the way. If the media and the Democrat governors and mayors and Antifa are all obstructing law enforcement, you got to break their backs. You got to go in hard. You got to escalate it. You have to have control over the escalation ladder. That's rule number one of any conflict. What does that mean? When I say control the ladder of escalation, it's that age-old metaphor of bringing a knife to a gunfight. You start a fight with somebody. They have a gun. You have a knife. They control the escalation. Why? Because if it turns deadly, they got you. They can control whether it goes hot or cold, whether it stops or whether it ends in bloodshed, because they have the bigger gun or the gun at all. You don't bring a knife to a gunfight because you cannot control the escalation of the fight. If it keeps escalating, you're dead because they'll shoot you in the face. Is Trump bringing a knife to a gunfight here? Is he bringing a brawl and a confrontation to the left, half-cocked, not ready to finish it, and they are obstinate? They will break the laws. They will disobey the laws. They will be riotous, anarchic. They will abuse process. And the Trump administration is constrained by federal judges, by the mayor, by the governor. You got to be willing to go all the way and summon your troops. You got National Guard in Texas that are willing to go to Chicago and enforce the laws. Chicago PD, different story. This is how we have to think. And this is like, hey, newsflash, this is like Civil War thinking. This is like constitutional crisis, political crisis thinking. That's what it's come to, because that's what this is fundamentally. You got millions of people in the country, they don't want to leave. That's a problem. You got just as many people that are governors and mayors of major states and cities, they don't want them to leave either. And they have their shock troops, their organizers, and they've got their own law enforcement, their own security forces that are willing, that are loyal to them. Starting to get it? And I seriously doubt that Trump is going to be the guy that finishes the job. I think he's too old, too tired. He just doesn't have the imagination. He is not an operator on the level of a Vladimir Putin, of a Xi Jinping, of a Franklin Roosevelt, of an Abraham Lincoln. He just is not on that level. He wants the New York Times to like him. Is he the guy that's going to bring it across the finish line, or is he the guy that's going to light the powder keg and blow everything up? I still am deeply afraid that it's the latter. So that's my hot take on these detention facilities. And don't mistake what I mean. I want the deportations. I want these left-wing agitators to be arrested. I want the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago to be looked at for how they're not helping this situation. But if you start a fight that you're not ready to finish, it's going to get ugly for us, because we only have a few more years here. And then it's anyone's ball game. That's why I said on the Dave Smith podcast, we might need a Republican to win. And I don't want it to be Vance, but I don't want it to be a Democrat either. Because now you see what they're capable of. You know, there was this idea, we flirted with the idea, maybe we'll go with the left, maybe we'll go with the Democrats. Then a left-wing nut job shot Charlie Kirk in the face. And whether you believe that official narrative or not, and I understand many people don't, somewhat doesn't even matter. Because then 100,000 left-wing people that are real, that we know for a fact, they got on TikTok and laughed and joked and celebrated. Black people marched in the streets and said, fuck Charlie Kirk, racist garbage. Okay, so, you know, it's playing with fire, actually. Democrats coming back after the Trump administration has pushed them and dared them to and provoked them, they're going to put us in gulags. Like, I don't know. I don't love what we're getting from Republicans, but yeah, the way that Trump is going about this, you're like daring the Democrats to destroy us before we can destroy them. I don't like that. Anyway, so that's that. But I do want to move on. I want to get into the Israel-Hamas ceasefire. This is maybe the biggest story, potentially the biggest story of the year. And like I said, we were going to talk about it last night. We ran out of time. And what has happened in the past couple of days, in a very, I would say, surprising turn of events, very rapid development, is that the Trump administration seems to have forced Israel and Hamas to make a peace agreement. And this is being trumpeted by both sides as the end to the war in Gaza. After 2 years, they're saying this is the definitive end, which is unbelievable because this is an accomplishment that has eluded the Biden administration, the Trump administration, the Europeans, the UN, the Middle East. Nobody has been able to make it happen. But basically, 2 years to the day, it seems that the Trump administration has forced both parties to the table and forced them to sign an agreement that ends the war. That is what they're saying. And today, in the Israeli Knesset, their legislature, Israel has officially approved the first phase of a peace agreement with Hamas. Hamas has agreed to it. Israel has now signed on to it officially. Their Knesset voted in favor. They agreed to it. And this has the backing of the Arab League, of the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. It has the backing and the facilitation of the Trump administration. We have a deal. And this is a story from the New York Times. We'll read through this and we'll talk about what that really means. It says, quote, Israel's government on Friday approved an agreement brokered by President Trump that paves the way for a ceasefire in the war in Gaza and the return of all remaining hostages held by Hamas. The approval by Israel's cabinet on Thursday in the United States came hours after Mr. Trump and the chief Hamas negotiator declared that the war in Gaza was over. In a televised speech, the chief Hamas negotiator, Al-Haya, said Israel and Hamas reached an agreement to end the war and that the United States had provided guarantees that the war was over. Mr. Trump said he would travel to the Middle East this weekend to attend the signing of the agreement and that the return of Israeli hostages and a subsequent exchange of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel would take place Monday or Tuesday. U.S. officials said 200 American troops would be sent to Israel to help coordinate the execution of the deal. Interesting little rub there. It remained unclear on Thursday evening if the war was truly coming to an end. The initial agreement between Hamas and Israel addresses only a few of the 20 points in a plan that Mr. Trump proposed last month. And some of the most difficult issues appear to have been left to a future phase of negotiations. Deja vu all over again. Those include who would rule a post-war Gaza and whether Hamas would lay down its weapons. Sort of a big deal. When asked if the deal meant the end of the war, Israel's foreign minister Gideon Sa'ar said, quote, it is the implementation of the first phase. He said, although more conditions must be met, he said, we don't have any intention to renew the war. The American forces, mostly military planners, logistics, security, and other support specialists, will join soldiers from nations in the region, including Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. There's no plan to send U.S. military into Gaza, though, according to U.S. officials. The foreign minister of Israel said the truce would begin immediately after Israel approved the deal, and Israeli media reported that it had gone into effect. Yet, there was a degree of uncertainty about whether the ceasefire began. Earlier, an Israeli government spokeswoman said a ceasefire would go into effect in Gaza 24 hours after the vote. Israeli forces would first pull its forces back to lines, leaving them in control of 53% of the Strip. After the withdrawal, Hamas would then have 72 hours to return all the hostages. So let's back it up a little bit, and we'll talk about the state of the play here. So Trump said a couple of weeks ago that he had a deal in place with the backing of all of the Muslim countries. And consider the broader context. Trump is furious with Israel because the war has gone on for too long. Trump has told them to stop. They refuse. And now the United States' key allies are even trying to force Israel to stop. There's a vote in the United Nations, or there's a summit held on the sidelines of the United Nations. France, the United Kingdom, Canada, other European countries are supporting a Palestinian state. At the same time, Israel bombs Qatar, a key American ally, infuriating Trump. In the same week, Netanyahu is going around telling everybody that he controls the United States. He controls Trump. So it is in this context, Trump is furious. They're bombing Qatar. All these other countries are going against Israel and the United States recognizing Palestine. Netanyahu has personally insulted the president. So Trump has had enough. He says in the White House with his arms folded, he says, I will not allow Israel to take the West Bank. He says it's enough. They're done. Israel has lost everybody. They lost the Middle East, which got together at a meeting of the Arab League and the OIC and condemned the strike. They lost Europe, that is recognizing Palestine. They lost Trump. They insulted the man. They went too far by bombing Qatar. Trump, in particular, is a dear ally of that country. So Trump finally pressures Netanyahu to end the war. Netanyahu is in town for the General Assembly at the United Nations in New York. He comes down to America. Trump gets him in the room with all the negotiators, Kushner, Witkoff, Ron Dermer. And Trump says, I'm not looking for a yes, but he says, I'm looking for a signature, a yes, without conditions. You're going to end the war before you leave. And so last Monday, he gets it. Not without some manipulations, though. Netanyahu changes the deal at the last minute, and they present this 20-point plan for peace at a press conference last Monday. And what does this 20-point plan look like? It says that Hamas is going to give up all the hostages immediately. Following that, Israel will release thousands of Palestinian prisoners. So there's a prisoner exchange. And that is supposed to build rapport and gender trust, resolve one of the key reasons for the war. After this, Israel will have a partial withdrawal in stages. At the same time, Israel will oversee the disarming of Hamas. They will lay down their weapons and be expelled from the country. So Hamas will cease controlling the Strip, and the Strip will be demilitarized. After this happens, and Israel is satisfied, a technocratic governance committee takes control of Gaza. It is under the control of an international body chaired by Trump, and another board member will be Tony Blair from the United Kingdom. Humanitarian aid will come through. Israel will control the security perimeter for the foreseeable future. Investment will come in to rebuild Gaza. And maybe there might be a Palestinian state in the future. This is the rough outline of the deal. And this has buy-in from all of the key players, from all of the Arab Muslim countries, from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, from Turkey, from Egypt, from Pakistan, Indonesia. All the relevant parties have come together and agreed. Israel agrees, Hamas receives it favorably. The United States and the Muslims say, look, this is as good as you're going to get. And there's an agreement. But what actually gets signed today? Over the past week, there's some new language that is being introduced. Again, these are 20 points. And within the 20-point plan released by the White House, they don't use the language that there will be phases, stages, comprehensive peace. None of that language is used in the deal. The deal is 20 points, and there's not a lot of detail. And what does that mean? If the deal is just 20 general bullet points and there's no details, no timeline, what this implies is that these things need to still be negotiated. If there's no details, that's a problem. Because in order to implement the deal, well, there's going to be some interpretation involved. On timeline, on specifics. There needs to be specificity. And if that is not written, if that's not in black and white, then that is really up to both parties to decide. And one party might have a very different idea of what the deal means. And if that's the case, well, then there still needs to be a lot of negotiation, which means you really don't have a deal. It's not a deal until you got a deal. And it's not a deal until you got all the details in black and white laid out in print, signed, a commitment. So you have a problem at the very beginning, which is this whole thing is short on detail. No timeline, no specifics. It's just a general agreement in principle about some things, and it leaves a lot to be decided later and some very big questions to be decided in principle. Like, there's no agreement on whether there'll be a Palestinian state. There's no agreement on the timeline for withdrawal, if Israel will completely withdraw. There's not agreement even on the big things. There's no specificity or timeline on the small things. So what happens over the past week, as Hamas deliberates and eventually assents, is they take some liberties. And Hamas agrees to a phase of the deal. The Knesset votes on a phase of the deal. And now this new vocabulary is added. What does the foreign minister, what does the spokesperson from Israel say? Well, we've agreed to the first phase. I don't see the word phase in the deal. I don't see stages in the deal. So even this very ambiguous and incomplete 20-point plan, they're only agreeing on some of it. When they sign a deal, they're agreeing to like 3 or 4 of the points out of 20. And what are the points that they've agreed upon? A prisoner exchange, a partial withdrawal, humanitarian aid coming through. Those are the only things they've agreed to. And a temporary ceasefire. Those are the major points that have been agreed upon. So the deal is signed. Now Hamas has 72 hours to give up the hostages. Israel will free some of the Palestinian prisoners. Humanitarian aid comes in. In the meantime, there's no bombing. In the meantime, Israel withdraws, but they maintain control of most of the Gaza Strip, like 53 to 58% of it. This has already happened. This happened in January. In January 2025, the same exact thing happened. The Trump administration sent Steve Witkoff to Israel, and they bent Netanyahu over and forced him to take a ceasefire, right? That was the narrative. Trump ended the war in Gaza before his second term even began. Steve Witkoff got the better of Netanyahu, forced him to sign on the dotted line, to the chagrin of the far-right Israeli members of the government, and the war was over. That's what they said. But what really happened? The devil was in the details. It was a 3-phase deal. The first phase they agreed on, and that was a prisoner exchange, a withdrawal, and a ceasefire. Humanitarian aid coming through. All the same points here. They said, we will decide the other stuff later. Like who will control Gaza, whether Israel will permanently leave. We'll decide all the big stuff later. What matters is we agree to a first phase. The second phase we'll negotiate while the first phase is implemented. And in March, we'll revisit this. Well, what happened? During the first phase of the deal, the prisoner exchange and ceasefire were successful. Humanitarian aid came through. They both got a reprieve. Israel got $12 billion in foreign aid from the United States. They regrouped. And then in March, when the first phase of the deal expired, they came right back in. And they didn't even try to negotiate a second phase. They blew the Palestinians off. They didn't even try to negotiate a second phase. They kept stalling until the first phase expired, and then they came right back in. And they said the deal's off. For basically no reason. They fabricated a reason. They came right back in. They reinvaded harder than ever. Famine, war, bombing, shooting people in the back of the head, razing entire cities. And it went on for 7 months. That sound familiar? Now here we are again. We have a first phase. We're going to exchange prisoners. We're going to have a temporary ceasefire. We're going to let the aid come through. And second phase, we'll figure that out later. Well, what are the things that still need to be resolved? Some very big questions, like one, whether Hamas disarms. Kind of a big one. So let's game this out. Hamas gives up the living and dead hostages. Israel gives them some of their prisoners. The fighting stops. Israel gets a reprieve. Hamas gets a reprieve. Well, when both sides get a little more comfortable with each other, Israel's going to come back and say, okay, that's all great, but now you need to give up all your guns and leave. And Hamas is going to say, well, we're not going to give up our guns and we don't want to leave. Now we're right back to where we started. So then Israel's going to say, well, give up all your guns and leave, or else we're going to kill you. And Hamas is going to say, well, bring it on. We're not leaving. The fundamental root causes of the conflict have not been changed. Hamas wants a Palestinian state. They want Israel out of Gaza. Israel is never going to leave Gaza fully. They're never going to leave. Israel has committed they're never going to give them a Palestinian state. And what's more, Israel has said, we will not allow Hamas to continue existing, much less controlling the Strip. So until you get a consensus on that, on these diametrically opposed opposite views, you're never going to get an enduring peace. So what I see happening is that maybe in the spring, when Netanyahu is up for re-election, when Israel holds elections again, maybe they're going to fabricate some reason to go back in. They're going to kill Hamas leadership. They're going to say that talks have stalled and Hamas is rearming. We need to go back in. Like that's one distinct possibility. Or maybe it happens sooner. Maybe it's consistent with the rest of the timeline so far. Israel takes a breather on their very intensive ground operations in Gaza, which is really exhausting their reserve ground forces. And they revisit the Iran question. They buy themselves some time. In order not to fight a two-front war, they make a temporary truce with Hamas. They pause operations. They let their reservists catch their breath. And then they turn their attention to Iran, which snapback sanctions have just gone back into effect. The United States is sending in refueling aircraft, major deployments in the Middle East. Russia is sending in air defense systems. The United States says it's enforcing its sanctions on Iranian oil. They're going to seize oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. Iran will not let the IAEA back in the country. We can only assume they are rearming. Netanyahu is giving speeches in English about how Iran is building ICBMs with nuclear warheads to attack New York. The Ayatollah said they're going to have no restrictions on the range of their missiles. So just like the earlier ceasefire, again, think of the timeline. Israel implemented phase 1 of a ceasefire with Hamas in January. And then from January to June, they went on the road to war with Iran. Basically, the second they stopped the war with Hamas, they started agitating for war with Iran. There are reports that say that Israel and its allies in the Trump administration, like Mike Waltz, they wanted a war with Iran as early as February or March. You got that? So in other words, their intention was to stop fighting Hamas on one front in January and then immediately turn and fight Iran on another front in February and March. Just like how their ground operations stalled in the summer of 2024, and they turned their attention to Lebanon, and they started their war with Lebanon really in October of 2024. The pager attack, the invasion of southern Lebanon, the decapitation strikes, thousands of airstrikes on Beirut and on southern Lebanon, while they had stalled their ground operations in Gaza. So the question, to put it succinctly, is this a peace deal, a peace agreement that ends the war in Gaza in a meaningful way? Which means that there's not going to be any more significant fighting, which means that the fundamental cause of the war has been resolved? Or is this a pause? Is this a tactical retreat, a strategic pause that gives Israel the opportunity to A, collect itself and regroup politically, militarily, and or B, focus on another front in their 8-front war. And I think it is almost certainly the latter. The idea that this is the end to hostilities, it just, once again, it flies in the face of the root causes of the conflict. Israel has said repeatedly, and by the way, this is not just Netanyahu. This is also the opposition. This is also the Israeli public. They say the bipartisan security consensus in Israel after October 7th, those are the words of the opposition leader Benny Gantz in the New York Times last week. He said the new bipartisan security consensus in Israel is that we can never have a Palestinian state. That was last week. It is the same consensus that Hamas cannot be allowed to rule Gaza. And what that implies is that Palestine is never going to be a thing. Israel is never going to give security control to the Palestinians. That means they're never going to leave. They're never going to leave the perimeter. They're never going to leave the interior. And as long as that's the case, Hamas is never going to lay down their arms and go willingly. They're never going to agree to a deal where they're not going to have a state. So that means that at some point in the future, in an indeterminate timeline, hostilities will be renewed. Israel will go back in. The timeline is subject to the political pressure inside and outside of Israel. And I think what happened is that the pressure just got to be too much. Israel was exhausted. They have been fighting this ground war since March, since they renewed hostilities, and it has been very taxing on their mostly reserve infantry, on their mostly reservist ground forces. Israel is reeling from the pressure from the Muslim world, from Europe, and now from the Trump administration. Netanyahu can afford to alienate Macron. He cannot afford to alienate Trump. So the pressure and the prospect of losing the United States, or alienating Trump in particular, it got to be too risky. What's more, you have another gathering storm in the Persian Gulf. That's very visible with the force posture of the United States, the collapse of diplomacy with Iran. I think that's very clear. So this looks to me like a strategic pause. And now Trump and Netanyahu can pat themselves on the back, and they get the public off their back, and people can stop talking about Israel for a few months. And then they're going to come back when everybody forgets and the administration is distracted by something else. And I'll tell you another thing. It worries me that you have 200 American personnel in Israel right now. It worries me that Trump is even going there. Because it's obvious whenever the United States gets invested in that way, this is an opportunity for Israel to draw us further into the conflict. I know I'm not the only one thinking this, and some people might say that's crazy. Okay, so what happens when one of these American personnel dies? What happens when Hamas kills one of these American logistics personnel in Israel? Anybody have a clue? What happens, God forbid, if something bad happens to the president of the United States in Israel and Hamas is to blame? And I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think that's likely, but it could happen. And this is the same kind of complication that we're in by being in Iraq. When we're in Iraq and Syria, what's the problem? It's that if Israel militates against Iran and we are perceived as supporting it, Iran could retaliate against troops in the region. And unlike Israel, they're not protected by THAAD batteries. They're not protected by missile defense. They don't have as much warning time, so they're going to get hit. So Americans are basically being used as like a human shield. They're being used, they're being put in the way of, in that context, Iran's missiles as a shield for Israel, or maybe as a way to get America involved in the conflict. And I have the same sneaking suspicion about this. Is this really the right idea that we're going to put more Americans in the Middle East? I don't care if it's a dozen. It's going to be 200. I don't care if they say they're not going into Gaza or not. It's a bad idea to have them there. So I'm not liking this deal. This seems like, by all appearances, it's a lousy deal. And I've said this from the start of the war. If all you do is read the headlines, man, this must be a roller coaster ride. Because it seems like every 6 months, there's a very promising peace process. Every 6 months, there's a very promising deal in the works. In May 2024, in November 2023, in January 2025, in October 2025. And if you're only reading the headlines, you're saying, oh, we almost had it there. Oh, well, looks like the war's over. I guess it's back on. But if you're reading between the lines and actually looking at how this stuff works, by no stretch of the imagination is anything being resolved here. This deal resolves nothing. It's identical to the deal in January. Prisoner exchange, temporary truce, humanitarian aid comes in. And really what this does is it benefits Israel strategically, tactically. They get a reprieve from their exhaustion. Netanyahu gets a political win. He gets the hostages back. He gets the political necessity of getting Trump and the pressure from the United States off his back. Maybe frees up the military to focus on Iran, which is another very distinct problem that is yet unresolved. And it gives them the maneuverability. That what this deal does is, what is unsaid, gives them the right to basically restart the war at any time. It would be one thing if the deal said there's an American commitment that there's gonna be no more war. That's a different deal. But what everybody is saying is, look, this is phase one. Let's not get carried away. The deal doesn't say Israel's out and a Palestinian state is in and Hamas has agreed to lay down their arms. No, they're still sticking to their guns. There are no guarantees. There are no commitments. It's all contingent. And what that means is Israel is free to maneuver from now until whenever on this indefinite timeline they're expected to renegotiate the second phase or whatever. So it's a very unstable peace. This is not a comprehensive deal. We're still very much in the war. And that's what these people do. They've been in a state of war for 70 years, 80 years. You know, and if you think this is it, you just don't know the Middle East. For all these people saying, wow, I guess Trump is the peace president. Yeah, and I guess 1948 was the end to the Israel-Arab conflict, right? Until 56 was, until 67, 73, 79. You know, it's always the end to the war until the next war starts. That's how it is there. So the deal is rotten. I don't care what they say, what the headlines say. Until there's an agreement from Hamas to disarm and an agreement from Israel to withdraw and give a Palestinian state, we're just rearranging the chairs on the deck. And we're going down the road towards war. And by the way, that goes also for Netanyahu's apparent message to Putin, which I also saw. There's a story today that Netanyahu intimated to Putin that he does not want a war with Iran, that they're going to resolve it diplomatically. That means nothing to me. Maybe it's true, maybe it's false. They want a war with Iran. So, in the same way that they're seeing, we'll see about a second phase, I'm saying we'll see about any of it. I struggle to believe that they're finished with what they started after October 7th. I really find that hard to believe. But that's that. So that's the peace agreement. We'll be watching very closely, and we'll see what happens with that. But for now, we're going to move on. We're going to take a look at the super chats. We'll see what you guys have to say about all this.
All right, let's get right into it. Y'all heard what Nick started off with. Don't be making fun of Candace Owens having a dream, man. Let Candace dream, man. When you believe in manifesting and tapping into a different dimension, maybe she is talking to Charlie. I don't know. But you could tell their little feud. They're not letting this thing go. Somebody needs to extend the olive branch, you know, and I wouldn't be upset with Candace if she decided to do it, because looking at their show when Nick was on Candace's show, I think Candace could extend the olive branch here. I really do. But then when I think about how Nick has behaved afterwards, like with certain things that he'll say, like, I totally understand that, you call somebody a black B word. Or let me actually not say that. I don't know if he said the black B word, but he called her the B word. And I wasn't trying to say you call a black woman a B word. You call anybody a B word and they're going to be offended. So I don't know. Maybe somebody like Myron, who has a good relationship with both of them, or Dave Smith, could bring them together and have Candace talk to Nick, have Nick talk to Tucker, all this stuff. We need to get over this stuff. All right. We need to get over this stuff. Nick was mentioning certain things in this episode about Trump not necessarily having the team perhaps to, you're stoking up this thing with the Democrats, but do you have the team that can now fight back when the Democrats are all riled up? And that's the same way I look at it for different reasons, but same thing with Nick. Hey, Nick, Candace, Tucker, Dave, y'all are on the same page. Theo Vaughn, like, come together, figure this out. Y'all may not agree on the same way of fixing the problem, but you all seem to be pretty aligned. And I think that y'all will do a whole lot more together, banding together, rather than separating yourself, especially when it's something petty that doesn't even matter. So let's get into the actual conversation. So Nick says he likes all this extraness with these ICE raids. And one thing that I wasn't aware of, and this is maybe one of those things that we should be paying attention to, where the ICE raid where Nick was referring to, where somebody was shot, I didn't know that there was another gun involved, that the people, had a weapon on them. So I don't know the ins and outs of that, but I don't like it at all. I don't like any of it. It's extra when it comes to appearance. It's not even real. Like, they're doing these big raids. It's almost like propaganda, because they're not doing the mass migration that they were saying, I'm sorry, not the mass migration, the mass deportation that they were saying that they're going to carry out. This is kind of one of those things that they'll just dangle in front of you that gets, the people who really are only caring about symbolism, but gets them excited. Look, we're deporting people. And in all actuality, it's not that many people. It's not that many people. Trump is putting together a whole bunch of carve-outs, and we've heard from Nick on this, and I'm sure we've had some other conversations outside of, just reviewing Nick's show, which is that a lot of these carve-outs are because, you have Silicon Valley, who obviously gave Trump some money this election, is working closely with Trump. We saw where they were sitting at the inauguration. So we understand that there's a certain relationship there, and we also understand that they want cheap labor. A lot of these people don't necessarily care about America's economy and Americans before they care about themselves. All right. Most people will care about themselves. Like, you care about, that's why even with the racial issues, if you use race to separate and divide, go into that race, have a sit down with you don't think that there's white people just arguing with white people, or black people just arguing with black people. But, when you actually get into the depths of the disagreements, I would say, people are going to argue with whoever. So even making it a racial thing, in my opinion, just takes away from adding anything into it. It just creates this racial division that we see all the time. So I don't want to stay focused on that, but with a lot of these raids, what does it end up looking like? It ends up looking like, here you got these racist white people that are trying to deport brown people, and in my opinion, they have to overcompensate because they're actually not doing a strategic mass deportation that I think would be looked at in totally different regards, rather than going in there with the mask and doing all the extraness, jumping off of planes. Like, we don't need all that. We don't need all that. Especially when you're just picking and choosing strategically, and we don't even know the strategy that you're basing who you're deporting and who you're not deporting. It just seems to be very random at best. But that's just me. That's just me. Maybe my perspective. Maybe I'm a little bit off on there. But I do not like the visuals. I don't like the energy. And it is causing a lot of the problems that Nick pointed out because it's so belligerent. And it's almost as if you look at the whole left versus right, And Nick even making the comments of whether or not, Trump has a team that would be able to go against the left after you're adding fuel to these fires, right? And it's almost as if the Democrats, who had already destroyed themselves, now Trump's team is just giving them more of a rallying cry, or, now that they can scream this victimhood, now you're just giving them that. Bring sensibility to the table, bring practicality, bring logic to the table. You don't have to do all this extraness. You don't have to make a scene. It doesn't have to be one of these elaborate rollouts of y'all acting like y'all are SEAL Team 6 going in to extract Osama or somebody like that. I don't know if that's the actual number, SEAL Team, but y'all get the point that I'm making. Like, all this extraness is not necessary, in my opinion, and it does more of a disservice than it does anything positive. Just my opinion on it. But Nick said certain things that, he believes that we need a tyrant to execute law enforcement. I should have done it earlier. Let me actually look up what a tyrant is. Let's look up the definition of tyrant. A cruel and oppressive ruler. Do we need a cruel and oppressive ruler to execute laws? I don't think so. I don't think that that's the best approach. Perhaps just somebody who's emotionless, as emotionless as possible, but cruelty, like a cruel, when I hear cruel and oppressive, like especially cruel, to me that comes across very emotional. Like you don't like these type of people. You're committing cruel, evil acts to people. You're oppressing people. It doesn't have to be anything like that. It doesn't have to be seen as an oppressive behavior if you're going about it in a strategic way where everybody's understanding, where you're not doing all the extraness, and everybody's very clear on what's happening. Now, I understand that maybe you can't be super transparent, but at least from us understanding who's getting deported, who's not getting deported, why are these people being targeted, why people aren't, especially when you add into all of the things that occurred with the colleges and people that said certain things against Israel. Now you're trying to deport them. It's just a whole bunch of messiness in there, a whole bunch of messiness. Now, I do agree with Nick. Perhaps I'm giving him the benefit of doubt of perhaps what he's trying to say, but you got to use your words carefully. I don't think a tyrant's needed. I don't think you need to be a tyrant in order to execute law enforcement. I don't think you need to be a tyrant. I actually perhaps think you need to be the opposite, not have any ill feelings towards a group of people, perhaps just have no feelings if you can. Don't have somebody who's emotionally invested in the issue. Now, is that impossible? I don't know. But even somebody like Tom Homan, where I don't know if Tom Homan's the best example, but Tom Homan seems to be somebody that has not a lot of feelings. So if you take that aspect of Tom Homan's, not having feelings, I'm just here to do a job, but perhaps removing a little bit of I don't know if you guys see Tom Homan as, a tyrant, but perhaps just removing any emotions that show any ill intent or ill feelings towards a particular group. I think that is what would be necessary in this situation, especially when it comes to stoking up the other side, because you're just giving them ammunition. You're giving them ammunition. You're giving them energy. You're refueling their batteries when they can now fight and call out this oppression. And now they can lean back and be active participants in that victim Olympics that we've always talked about. All right, so let's keep going. Let me take a look at the notes. Fears that what Trump is doing is activating the other side. And this is another thing that I thought about. Can you even really destroy the left? I think that whether it's left or right, Democrat or Republican, I don't think that one party can destroy the other. Now, logic and common sense may destroy one or the other, but I don't think one party can actively bury the other one. I think that a lot of the reasons why the Democratic Party was in the position that they're in, with a lot of Democrats not supporting them and not backing them, and them not having positive feelings towards their party, it's not because of the Republicans, in my opinion. It's because the Democrats, the policies that the Democrats put in play, Joe Biden going up there and saying that he's capable, and then you got him. It's like, how could y'all cover up this cognitive decline? There's no trust there. Then you got Kamala Harris completely bypassing the democratic process of becoming the candidate, the nominee. So I don't think that the right or the left should be concerned about destroying each other. I think that they should both be just concerned with what do the actual people want, what do the people need, what's best for the people, prioritize those needs, and come with a sense of practicality and logic, not trying to propagandize and emotionally trigger one side into hating the other. I just don't think that that's necessary if the goal is to get stuff done for the people, if the politicians actually do work for the people, instead of the elites that want us fighting against each other. So therefore they can use division to conquer us. But let's keep going. Let's keep going. He says you have to control the escalation of the fight. I agree with that. I agree with that. And that goes along with what we've been saying. You have to control the escalation of the fight, because this is the time right now where, I know we've been saying it for a while, where a civil war could easily be brewing. This is the time more so than ever, perhaps. I mean, think about it. We've had, in the last year, Donald Trump had another attempt, or what could have turned into an attempt, I guess, with the guy in the bushes. Then you have Charlie Kirk assassinated. Like, these are things that can shift the entire trajectory of the country, and things that can add fuel to a fire that's already burning and perhaps just waiting to blow up. Now you have a situation where it's Israel and Palestine, and Israel clearly has a huge influence on our government. And now the world has turned on Israel. A lot of America is not looking at Israel from a favorable perspective. Israel's looking pretty desperate. So now we got America desperate. We got Israel desperate. We got all this chaos internally when it comes to the Democrats versus Republicans. You got half the country hating the other side of the country. Things are all over the place. You got the Republicans losing a whole bunch of their most influential people, whether it's podcasters or politicians like Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's just a lot of uncertainty up in the air. And this is a time where leadership would probably mean the most, I would say, right? Can we all agree on that? Donald Trump, lead, unite the country. It's your job. Do what your job is. Instead of supporting all these other groups, instead of campaigning for a Nobel Peace Prize when literally you didn't even execute on the campaign promises that you had regarding wars when you were running. Last time I checked, Ukraine and Russia still going on. You made it seem like you were going to end that before you even got in office. Now, I'm just going based off of the promises that you made, the things that you said that you would that you would do. The ceasefire. You had a ceasefire, they spit in your face. You woke up and they're still bombing. And you crashing out on TV talking about they both don't know what the F they're doing. Nah, just say what it is. You know you wanted to blame BB. So Trump's getting bullied. War's still going on. Now he's even shooting people in international waters, I'm hearing, with Venezuela. Like, what? But you want a Nobel Peace Prize? Like, the delusion. Like, we are living in some of the most delusional times we've ever lived in, where people just see, like, this may be the time where, if you gather the majority of people, where people just can look at the same thing and see completely different things. Completely different things. All right, so let's keep going a bit. You know what else was funny that Nick said? He said that they don't play by the rules like we do. It's just a funny thing when they say they. He's talking about Democrats don't play by the rules like we do. I'm laughing at it, and I was laughing at it when he said it, because if you talk to Democrats, they'll say the same thing. They'll say, well, the Democrats, I'm tired of our candidates just playing by the rules. We need to break some rules, how Republicans are willing to break rules. So both sides say this stuff, and I believe both sides are guilty of this. If I had to lean one way or another, I don't know which way I would lean. Yeah. Perhaps leaning one way is just setting you up for failure anyway, because it's just putting you in the mindset as if one of these groups is better than the other, even if they are. Even if they are, it's to the point where they're both terrible. They're both terrible. We are being led by two terrible parties that do not have our best interest at heart, that are not working and representing the people, we the people. They're working, they're violating their promise to us in a lot of ways because they're working for the people that fund them, the lobbyists, all these big groups that donate to them. That's who they're working for, not us, and it's obvious. One thing that is a concern of mine is if U.S. troops are involved in this hostage exchange, that's a recipe for disaster. I'm being honest. If U.S. troops are involved in this hostage exchange, I will not be surprised if something happens, if something occurs and Hamas is blamed for it. I'm not saying who's going to do it. I'm just saying if something occurs and Hamas is blamed for it, I would not be surprised. Now, Nick was talking more so if Trump is involved in something out there and Hamas is blamed. I don't even think it has to be Trump. If there's U.S. soldiers that are assisting in this hostage exchange and something happens, you know both sides are going to propagandize it to say, oh, it was Hamas, or maybe it was Israel. Maybe it was Israel doing it on purpose. And then Hamas. You know people are going to have all their conspiracy theories. But ultimately, what I think it'll end up being is people are going to blame Hamas. I think. Now, I may be surprised, but depending on how it's done, if it's done, I just wouldn't be surprised if something like that happened. Maya, would you be surprised? She wouldn't be surprised either. So let's keep going. Yeah, I think it's interesting that they said it, and Nick said that Netanyahu continues to personally insult Trump. I agree. He did it with the ceasefire. They did it with Qatar. Netanyahu, who's rumored, I know Tucker's mentioned it a bunch of times, that a lot of people that Tucker speaks to in Israel, that Bibi Netanyahu's running around telling people like, I control America, I control Trump. And based on actions, I definitely would say that that's accurate. I don't know if Bibi's running around saying it, but I think what makes it relevant is the fact that we're actually seeing it. So, yeah, y'all take it or leave it. One thing that Nick said, he said saying Hamas can't exist, or when he was saying that Hamas can't exist, it's almost like to me saying, well, the Democrats can't exist. Like, you're never going to be able to get rid of all the Democrats. Like, do you think that you're ever going to be able to go into Palestine and kill all of the Hamas members? Like, it's a way of thinking. It's a I don't want to say it's an ideology, but it's a group that's born out of them being oppressed and having evil and destruction or things that they don't like. Let me actually say this. I don't know if I can accurately say or bring up proof to say that it was born out of oppression and destruction. I believe so in a lot of ways, and I'll explain that. Can I say, yeah, maybe I can say that. I actually can say that because I do believe that all of this was caused by the Palestinians having their land stolen and being kicked off their land, not properly being compensated for it, and Israel violating this international law of them thinking that they can take over a country in which I believe they owned about 6% of the land at the time, and Palestinians owned about 90%, and them not compensating them, kicking them off the land, not giving them the right to return, all these things. I think that that's wrong. And I think that we'd be very ignorant to think that this war just started on October 7th. So my point, going back to them saying that Hamas can't exist, is that even a realistic thing to say, especially something that was born out of them fighting against oppression? Right? You can argue that's their mindset. They're fighting against oppression. So do you think that you oppressing them more and committing more violent acts against them, do you think that's really going to destroy them? Or is it going to make more people pick up arms and want to fight on behalf of that cause, whether they agree with everything that Hamas represents or not? So that's just how I look at it. But one thing that I was asking myself as I was watching this and want to ask y'all is, I wonder what Trump thinks about Charlie Kirk's passing. And that may be an obvious thing. What do you mean? He spoke at his memorial. We already know that Trump, how he thinks about it. He liked Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was a big fan of his, big supporter, helped him get elected, a lot of people would say. But think about what I'm saying again. I wonder, let me actually rephrase it. I wonder how Charlie Kirk's death has impacted Donald Trump mentally. This is somebody that was shot. This is somebody that I think weeks after had somebody else sitting in the bushes ready to shoot him. And then he sees Charlie Kirk actually be assassinated. Reports have come out. I think I forget exactly who was saying it, but allegedly Donald Trump is fearing for his life. Now, I don't know who he's fearing, for his life about, but it's strange to me that Donald Trump never, I mean, if he did do a deep dive or investigation on who shot him, it's kind of surprising that none of us even know who. Were any of us given any information on the guy that was on the roof? I forget his name by now. The weird kid, looking kid that they just linked to this and said, oh yeah, that's the kid that did it. And then the other guy down in Florida, I believe, on the golf course. Like, do we know any more information about these? Maybe I just haven't looked into it properly, so maybe I should do that. But to me, you would think that a guy like Trump with the ego like Trump, he would not stop until he finds out who was behind this, and that he would put him on blast, perhaps similar to how he put the Central Park Five on blast. Maybe he would put take out a big one pager in the newspaper and say, this is who tried to kill me. We haven't heard any of that. We haven't seen any of that. So it just makes me wonder, like, is Trump really scared of the people that tried to assassinate him? Perhaps he doesn't want to uncover who it really was because he may think that as he gets closer and closer to releasing that information or him finding out, now that puts them at risk. Now they may take more measures to make sure that they try to finish the job next time. I don't know. These are the things that I would be thinking about if I was Trump. So when I sit back and wonder why Trump's doing certain things and you observe everything around him, and it's just, you think about these things. That's all I'm going to say. You think about them. And the last question that I'll finish off with is that I was pontificating upon. Is that the right way to say that, Maya? All right. The last thing that I was pondering was, when you look back at like all the big situations that have happened, whether it's like a JFK being assassinated, MLK being assassinated, 9/11, other big situations, and maybe some lesser ones as well. Let's say 2020 with, we all know what happened in 2020 with whatever you would call it, the pandemic, whatever you want to call it. Does anything happen that the elites, not the people with money, I want to be very clear, I'm talking about the elites, the ones that pull the strings, right? The ones that play chess with our lives. Is there any one of those things that we think that the elites weren't behind, that they didn't directly either encourage or influence or carry out or paid it? I'm just asking, because I sit back and wonder, who controls the world, if somebody's really just, making all of these things happen and putting us against each other, divide and conquer. And I think we can agree on that part. But what I'm asking is, how high does it go? How high does it go? I mean, MLK, didn't the civil suit find that the government was behind his assassination? JFK, I'm sure there's a lot of things that are being uncovered or not being uncovered for a reason, even though Trump promised that a lot of those files would be put out there. You look at Epstein, you look at 9/11, Tucker's got his documentary out on all these things. It seems like there's somebody controlling a lot of these moves. And they come at a particular time to solve a particular thing, or to make us think one way or another, or to just have us seeing it from a perspective that aligns with the elite, agenda. Oh no, we need them fighting. Let's do something. Oh, we need them not paying attention. We need them looking left. All right, make sure you put something over there to the right. It just seems like that's occurring. I don't really have any more proof or anything more than what I've already said on it, but these are just the things that go through my mind, and I'm wondering if they go through your minds as well. And I guess where I'll finish off is a quote from Nick and saying, it's always the end of the war until the next war starts. That's what I think will happen, unfortunately, in the Middle East if more of us don't continue to just push this message of peace, harmony, us living in harmony, and us striving for that quote unquote greater peace that we always talk about. So it's always going to be the end of the war until the next war starts. We have to figure out a different solution. We have to take war off the table as an option that is allowed for us to resolve our conflicts, in my opinion. So let's do better. Let's be the change that we want to see in the rest of the world. As always, please like, subscribe, turn your notifications on, and most importantly, please leave a comment. Please leave a comment. I'd love for y'all to tell me where I may be missing something, where I can have a little bit more detail on, or I need to elaborate on, or something that I can read to give me a little bit more insight in a particular area. Whatever it is, we all have blind spots. We all have them, and I don't want to ignore mine. So y'all let me know exactly what y'all are thinking. And with that, I'll let y'all go. Y'all have a good one. Until next time.
It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.